Hey everybody, this is So Many Sequels, your book club for movies. I'm Josh.
I'm Garrett.
And I'm David.
Welcome to the show. This is it, our last week of Party Like It's 1999 November. What, am I right? I'm right about that, right?
I don't
you're
know.
right.
We've changed it so many. We've done Party Like It's
I was gonna
1999
say,
November.
I think I'm
we
right.
did Back in Time, 1999. But no, I think that is what you initially, I think you said it correctly.
Yeah, because later this week we have our fan pick review coming up, which great feedback. We got great feedback on the poll for this month.
Yeah.
People were passionate about their 1999 comedies.
I will tell you all that the winner, Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, which we announced on our social, So Many Sequels on Instagram.
Baby, yeah.
Oh, behave. I will tell you all it won by one vote. One. So, yeah, all the votes count. Stop the count, whatever you want to say. I don't know. But there was a lot of passion. Galaxy Quest was second.
Galaxy Quest,
then
I believe, yeah.
Big Daddy was
Big
third,
Daddy.
and then Life was in there. But yeah, a lot of passion for all these movies. I got messages about several. I got messages actually about all but Big Daddy. Nobody really had anything to say about it, but I got a message from one person who said that her now husband actually took her on their first date to this old spaghetti warehouse in downtown Tulsa, and then to go see Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me in the theaters. They got married. Hey, so good. I might have questioned that first date choice, but he knew what he was doing, I guess.
Yeah.
Then Galaxy Quest. Oh my gosh, I got a message that said we must do Galaxy Quest because he said there's all the podcasts already do Austin Powers content, and I thought, you're right. I mean, yeah, they do, but we had to get there eventually, and I still think that we might get to Galaxy Quest. So,
and
then
don't
finally,
count Galaxy Quest out. We love that movie. We'll find a reason.
It's a lot of niches, so we can work it in somewhere.
If you saw our poll, Life was unfortunately at a distant fourth, and I did get a message calling out, "Where's the love for Life? Where is
the love for
Life?" They
Starring Eddie
voted.
Murphy
I
and Martin
agree.
Lawrence.
Yes, they voted for Life. Not many voted for Life this time around, so maybe next time we'll get to
Life
these
was
other
one of
three.
the movies that
There's
I
going to be
watched.
consequences and repercussions, I can tell you that.
Yes. It was on either, again, TBS, HBO, Stars. It was on all of those like movie channels all of the time, and it is so good.
I feel
Go
like
watch Life.
all
You
four
gonna
of
eat
these
your cornbread?
those movies were on TV all the
I'm
time.
eat your cornbread.
You gonna eat
I
my
eat
cornbread.
pieces of. I have pieces of corn bigger than that. What does he say? I don't know. Do you know what I'm trying to do?
Yeah, you're going
Yeah,
for Austin
yeah.
Powers now, though.
Exactly.
There'll
I
be
got
time for
bigger
that
pieces of
next.
corn in my
There'll be time for
crap.
that later this week.
Yeah. Anyway, we got Austin Powers' The Spy Who Shagged Me coming up later this week, so be sure to subscribe. So Many Sequels on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting app. Then next month, So Many Santas. We'll talk about that later. But let's catch up on what we've been watching this week. Big week for movie releases as we get into the holiday season kicking up. Wicked came out. Vader 2 came out. Next week is actually Thanksgiving, this week we're going into Thanksgiving, so we got more movies coming out later in the week. Dave and I both saw Wicked separately, so I feel like we should jointly start talk with. What do you think?
I agree.
So I think I'll start because I know
go
Wicked,
first.
and you were more of a. You weren't a. I don't want to say you weren't a fan, but you just were a newbie to it. I'm not like. You see some people online who are just like uber obsessed. I'm not that. I've seen it once on stage, and it was here in Tulsa, not even terribly long ago, just a few years ago, I think. And I loved it. It was great. I have a lot of knowledge about Wicked just because of the Oklahoma connection that Kristen Chenoweth has. She originated the role of Glinda on Broadway, and I went to Broken Arrow High School where she went. It trained in the same theater program, but I digress. Anyway,
basically, you're saying you're Glinda the Good Witch?
Yes, that's what I've been saying for years, and Broadway hasn't called yet, so we're working on it. But anyway, all that to say, I've been aware of Wicked for a long time. I've known the music way longer than I've known the show, or like having seen the show, and so I was excited going into the movie, and I gotta say, I was personally blown away by it. It's still fairly new. I don't want to get into spoilers because I still think there are spoilers, even though this is an older story. Not everyone is privileged enough to get to see this show on stage or, whether on tour or in Broadway. So, being mindful of spoilers, I really loved it. I really felt like the cast was stellar. Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo are probably both going to be in awards discussions. I don't know that I'm not going to say they're shoo-in, but I think they're in the discussions. They're very strong performances. And also, my last thing before I go to David, I really felt like that it was built into this. I really felt like they built Oz into a world that I haven't seen done on screen with Oz. It felt like Middle Earth. It felt like Hogwarts. It felt like, these fictional lands that we see. It felt like whatever, name your Star Wars planet. And one, I don't know if a big budget musical has been split into two epic pieces like that. I have to do research, but off the top of my head, I can't think of a musical done this way on screen. So it's very cool to
Didn't
see.
Cats have a
big.
sequel called Cats Meow?
Yeah, they haven't made it yet, but yeah, it's in the development. So anyway, I think it's big in more ways than one, and I've had a lot of fun with it. David, you're a Wicked newbie. You have not seen the stage show, right?
I have not. No.
So what did you think watching it on screen for the first time? How did it win you or not win you? What are you?
Well, what I will say
Are
is
we
that my
keeping
wife loves. No. What I will say is my wife loves Wicked. Nikki has been praising Wicked, hyping it up to me for 15 years, like the whole time we've been married, or not married, but in a relationship.
Even longer, yeah.
And I was kind of generally dismissive of it, just
As you are with
because
musicals.
One, like as it's been well established that I hate musicals, okay, and it takes a lot for them to win me over. But my general thing is like she would be describing this incredible show, and I hadn't seen it, and I had no way to. I was like, I'm trying to put this thing together in my head based on all these like things she's describing and listening to. I heard the songs, like Defying Gravity is kind of hard to avoid generally, but I'd heard some of the songs and I was like, this is great, but I hadn't really lost on the context. So here comes the movie. I'm anticipating just kind of being ho-hum about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta say, something has changed within me. I loved this show. It was actually really, really, I thought it was really well done. The performances are very strong. Grande is hilarious. Cynthia Erivo is honestly fantastic. Honestly, I really liked her in this movie. And in my opinion, there's not a weak link in terms of performances. Everybody pulls their weight. Everybody is good in this. The choreography is great. The way it's shot is great. Like, so it's directed by John M. Chu, who also directed In the Heights, which we covered a few years ago. And
Underseen in the Heights.
He has an eye. This guy knows how to depict a musical on screen. I think he has a great vision for it. This was way more complicated, I'm sure, because it does bring in elements of like visual effects. It does bring in, I think, just a bigger scale and more production elements, because you're creating, like Josh said, this version of Oz that we haven't technically seen. They get to the Emerald City, and there have been many depictions of the Emerald City. There's actually a lot more Oz stuff than you might realize. I've been finding out this weekend. There's a lot more adaptations of Oz than we kind of cover beyond just the original Wizard of Oz. I think a lot of people were concerned that it looked kind of drab in terms of the color, but I thought that actually ended up working really well as the movie went on. There were people who were concerned.
I think those people might
about
actually be
runtime.
blind.
Well,
some of us are.
Well, yeah, I don't.
I'll admit
you are not
some
one of these
people
people.
are color. Some people do have trouble with color, but I'll admit the first images that we saw it was all very dark colored, and I can understand people's trepidation, but actually watching it, I think that the sort of more muted tones at times benefited the story. It kind of mirrored what you see, this version of Oz in a way. Some people were concerned about the runtime. Josh, you mentioned it being split into two halves. This film is longer than the entire play on stage, so like there were people who were concerned, like, what all are they adding? And based on what my wife said, they didn't add much to anything.
Almost nothing.
A lot of it is just how they let moments play out. Like there's so much more depth, because I've watched a few clips from the stage versions, and moments can breathe so much more in cinema than they really can on stage at times. So yeah, I was really blown away. I'm converted to being a Wicked fan at this point. Um, I'm excited for part 2. Nikki has told me a lot of what happens in part 2. She hasn't told me everything. Part 2 sounds like it's gonna be kind of a bummer in a lot of ways. So I'm interested to see how that works in terms of a follow-up film. But yeah, I don't know. I really enjoyed this.
One of these
Excellent.
days I'll see it. I will say I don't
Mhm.
know much about it. I have avoided Defying Gravity other than hearing like maybe people say Defying Gravity as they belt it as loud and powerfully as they can, which is great. But hearing the whole song I have not. And I was kind of like mid on it because marketing didn't really try to seek me out as a swaitable kind of a person. It relied on the fact that it probably you already know it or you're not interested. And that's just not totally true. So I would ask them to consider me next time a little bit if I'm going to get selfish here because I just don't know anything about it. And so for me, it was kind of like you just played the songs that I'm kind of supposed to know, but didn't tell me what this is. But I've heard nothing but good things. So definitely excited. And the amount of high praise is far exceeding what I think general expectations have been. So I'm very excited to go see it based
Yeah.
on word of mouth. Millions and dollars of marketing.
Major platforms. Like you cannot open TikTok right now without seeing.
You
something
can't
to
step
do
foot
with it.
inside of a Target without being assaulted with Wicked merch. I mean, it's
Yeah.
Well, I'm going over there. We'll see.
everywhere.
There's
So
There's almost
it's
nothing
out
without
there,
a Wicked
but
tie-in right now.
I feel like I
It's
live
out
so
there,
far
but
off the
it's-
grid right now, and I just deleted the apps from my phone.
you did.
That's all I
I don't
did.
know how
Threads
you're
for, like,
avoiding it
what-
with
for,
your
like, 3
eyeballs
weeks.
out in the world. Like, I'm so serious. It is everywhere. If you start to
Yeah.
pay attention, it's like when you see a type of car and then you can't unsee it. I mean, there's
Yeah.
Wicked. It's Wicked. They're selling Wicked makeup. They're selling Wicked drinks at different places. Starbucks has cups. It's everywhere.
The theater
and-
merch was actually pretty cool too. They had some cool ball caps. They had
Well, and it paid
some
off
wicked popcorn
because-
buckets and such.
We're about to talk. It had the biggest musical opening of all time.
Yes. Yeah.
And I want to get this in right now before you start your box office spiel. Wicked supposedly had a budget of $150 million, which is $100 million less than Red One and a bunch of other really horrible films that made almost no money, made by companies
Mhm.
like the Walt Disney Company, mainly because they are, I think, suspect number one of overspending on bullshit. Supposedly, both parts of Wicked will cost $350 million, which is almost the same as one Indiana Jones 5. Get your
Yeah.
shit
That's crazy.
together, or I'll do it for
Yeah.
you. You
Yeah,
do
that's
not.
crazy.
They're
I am
like
really-
if it's like I don't want to say something defamatory, but it's suspicious. Where's this money going?
No, I believe, unless I'm off, this Wicked budget is pretty close to what the budget was for Inside Out 2. So I'm kind of hoping that the inflated budgets that don't really seem to pay out are going to go away thanks to being way past pandemic now and out of those strike situations, because even this was ballooned a little bit because they had to pause. They were shooting and they had to pause for the writer and actor strikes, and had to come back. And I was watching an interview with John Chu where they talked about it was tough because we did have to take, we started production during before the pandemic. That's when we started with some of the casting, and then we had to take a break, and then we came back. And as we're kind of getting our legs together, we had to take another brief pause. But luckily, they said, that's going to balloon the budget a little bit because you stop spending, and then you have to come back and you have to get all these people hired, basically rehired again, or whatever. But anyway, I'm hoping that that's a thing going to become a thing of the past. But I don't know. I don't think our economy is going to make things suddenly get cheaper all of a sudden.
No. So that's Wicked.
Hey, highly
Nice.
recommend it. Go see it. I give it a 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah, do you want to talk about For the Love of the Game?
Yeah.
Just because it's
So
been
I
David and
took-
Josh show so far.
I took a couple of themes that we had this year and combined them. We had done that a little bit with Blair Witch and Sixth Sense in 1999 and horror. And I did that with Sports September and 1999. And I revisited an underrated movie. I think I would consider it underrated, underappreciated.
Hmm.
It's called For Love of the Game. It stars Kevin Costner and it's directed by Sam Raimi.
No, I don't
And
think I knew that part.
I didn't really pay attention to it
Wow.
until this year, but I picked it and I was like, it's been a while since I liked or watched this movie. I always liked it. It's baseball. Kevin Costner does great baseball movies. And so this is like the third one in his list of like Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, and then For Love of the Game. And what I like about this is it is relatively low stakes. They make it clear that Kevin Costner is a pitcher who has been great. He is on his way out the door. The team is at the end of the season and they've had a terrible season. And so they don't really have anything on the line. But he goes out there and at any moment you can do something magical and starts to pitch a perfect game. And not only this is he's going through all of this existential stuff, but he's going through these moments in his mind and he's using the baseball game as a metaphor for his relationship with Kelly Preston, who is the romantic lead in there. And so he's going through these moments and he's remembering this relationship. And then in like the 6th inning, he's like, anybody been on base? He hasn't. He's just out there throwing the game. He's really thinking about it. And they use the game itself as a way to kind of tell the story about a relationship. You know, you start off just in the game. You know, your first 3 innings, you're just throwing the baseball, trying to get a feel for it. Things feel pretty good, but it's early, you know, whatever. You're feeling things out. And then you get to the 4th inning, and then there's some kind of, you know, complicated stuff that happens.
So-
little hairy little situation happens. 8th inning, you know, it's really like, oh my God, stuff is getting real. And he throws a perfect game. He had found a perfect woman. It's this metaphor that they use throughout the whole thing. It's really well done.
So there's
little
even a little
long.
So Many Sweethearts in there.
There is a little So Many Sweethearts in there. It'll work for that. But, you know, it's a fun little sports movie. Kevin Costner does those pretty well. And I was surprised at it holding up. It's also got a very young John C. Reilly in it, Brian Cox. So it's J.K. Simmons. So it's got a really strong cast. It's a good movie. I think I gave it like a 3 stars. It's nothing amazing, but it's a fun little flick.
Yeah, John C. Reilly, J.K. Simmons. That's a Brian Cox. I see. That's a real murderer's row of actors right there. So there you go.
Do you think
Got a baseball reference.
you think Kevin Costner thinks he's a baseball?
You know what? I actually had a moment where I think that he was probably picked last because he was a theater kid and probably wrote, I don't know how involved he was, but he does all of these sports movies because I think he just wants to be a sports person.
Right.
And so he's like, I can act. I will act like I am a sport. Because he did Tin Cup. He did all of those sports movies. He's done so many sports movies.
Yes, he's done like, I have his list here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 about baseball alone.
God dang.
Fascinating.
And they're all about metaphors for stuff. So.
And there's some cowboy ones in there too, right?
Oh yeah,
Kevin
he's a
Costner
cowboy too. I mean,
just likes to be in
Yellowstone,
movies.
Dances with Wolves got some. He's not really a cowboy in that, but you know what I mean. It's Western.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he just likes to be in movies where he feels like he's being a traditional man?
Maybe. He's that kind of movie star.
It's for sports and cowboys.
That's his niche for
cops.
sure.
Well, we've not had one yet, so let me make the first wrestling reference of the show episode. I have finished watching the Mr. McMahon documentary that we've mentioned a few times on the show here.
Oh, proud of you.
You'd have to go back. I don't know when this started, but I was challenged by Garrett, at least, maybe David joined in too, to watch this show as someone who is not a watcher of wrestling. I've been around it on television. You know, I grew up and my dad watched it, and I know very little, okay? Now I know too much. Now I know way too much. Way too much. So,
what did you learn?
Well, so the cool thing to me about not knowing a lot of this was so many of these major stories in wrestling I didn't ever know anything about. And like, you know, I've seen enough of Vince McMahon to be like, he's a jackass, but I also know that there is a persona on television. So there's always this question of how much of that is real and what's fiction. And the moment where I thought, oh my God, this man is diabolical, there's a whole episode about the Montreal Screwjob.
Oh yeah.
And I'd never heard of that in my life.
Oh man, one of the
And
most infamous moments in wrestling.
I already talked to Garrett a little bit about it separate off the show, but man, I watched that episode and then I deep dived, read everything I could find about it because that's the kind of person I am.
There's
And
a couple documentaries on that just by itself.
yeah, I might try to hunt those down, but it is just is it's the complete lack of any kind of admission that that might have been not cool. It is what is what was alarming to me. And it just continued to snowball from there. I don't want to recount the whole show because David, you still need to watch it, and we don't have time to do all that. But other highlights include the incident, the accident involving Owen Hart,
Right.
and his passing after a fall during a show, and that all settled out to being that it was faulty equipment from the manufacturer, and they were technically at fault for that. But throughout this episode and these interviews, Vince in present day shows only concern for the company's state and reputation following that. There was very little concern for the family, his safety. I mean, they continued to do the show that night, which was heavily criticized afterward. He, to this day, thinks that was the right call to make. And he said something that tripped wire number 2 in my head that this man is something wrong. Bret Hart, in his own interview, said, if it were your son, Shane, I don't think you would have continued the show. And I just asked for that kind of same thought for us. And Vince was confronted with that in his interview, and he said, basically, forget my son. I would have still done it if it were me. And that's the first time I think I've ever heard someone genuinely put themselves ahead of their child in terms of importance. And it honestly made me sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. No, and there's a lot of that kind of aspect. I think I mentioned this thing. So pre the internet really taking off, you could kind of hide a lot of that sort of stuff a little bit better.
They talk about that. They did that on purpose.
Yeah, and they used to do stuff just to irritate the fans that were like actually trying to find out. The people who would try to like follow the show that closely, they would like do stuff just to piss them off. But there was a lot as a kid or as a teen watching this where you just kind of had to go off of like general vibes because like one, and this is still true today, you can't trust almost anything that any pro wrestler says because a whole aspect of their job is to trick you so that they can then subvert your expectation and or they want to get you thinking one thing so they can do something else. And so like you almost can't trust what any wrestler says. So there's a little bit of that, but also just I think everybody kind of had a general idea that like Vince is an a-hole, but we've started to learn more and more that he was actually far worse than just like a bad boss.
And
like,
unfortunately,
we've learned so much more.
In this documentary, you will see that a lot of people who worked with him and were on the show absolutely knew and did not care, encouraged it sometimes. And that's and it's clearly like a cultural problem, like within the WWE culture, because I mean I feel like they're at times talking about things where like this is a clear difference between right and wrong. And some of these guys are sounding as genuine as they can, and they are just on the wrong side. They just are.
Yeah.
They go into Chris Benoit and that situation. It seems that to this day, Vince McMahon does not seem to have much sympathy for his brain injury. It seems to maybe not even fully believe it. Steve Austin flat out does not. He said on camera, "I'm not a CTE guy. I don't believe it."
About that.
And
I heard
that
about that
was disturbing. And then they interview this former pro wrestler who wrestled for the WWE, who then went on to become a neuroscientist who studied CTE and was responsible for teaching it to the WWE afterward, because basically Vince once again realized that money was in trouble. Money was on the line if we didn't let this man talk about it. And so one of the major changes they made is, they don't do the chairs anymore, the chair hits. And they cut to The Undertaker talking about how he's pissed about that. And then he
Yeah,
goes on to
there's
talk about how, we don't really hurt each other. And then they show a supercut of like, I don't care what you say. Those are metal chairs connecting to heads.
Mhm.
You are hurting each other.
Yeah.
And I know that not every move may be real, but those chairs are dented, fellas.
Yeah, no, the chairs, that's one of the things that that's what they've always said, is they don't gimmick the chairs, or anything like that. Like the chairs, like, and guys would say, yeah, no, really give it to me. Some of them really wanted to go that far. And
That was
there
another
is
problem Garrett, you can tell me if I understand this right. It seems like there's a big culture, or at least there was, of, what would impress Vince? If I do something really dangerous and crazy on the show tonight. It was
Yeah,
not
a lot of
really
times that was the
safety.
way you would have to stand out because he ran the show based on his own power, and it was just like, if I don't like you, I'm gonna make you do a degrading thing. I'm gonna pull my pants down and make you kiss my ass on live television because I think it's funny. And again, he was the man with the power. He was the man with control. He's the man with the and my mate. Again, growing up, I watched WCW because it felt ick. The on-screen product felt ick. And again, going back to what I said when I watched it, like, if you want to just argue that it's all a TV show and playing a character, and your character is going back and looking at some of the history that they talk about in the show, truly, I would say one of the most evil, vile characters that has ever been created on television based on some of the things that he did on TV for jollies, I'd want to make sure I do some things in my external life that just maybe counteracted that narrative a little bit. I
Yeah.
get that it's kayfabe
Yeah.
and wrestling
No,
is one way, but like there's a line and he leaned in and they blended, right? And then they couldn't separate. And you show all of this stuff on TV, it makes it difficult for people to believe that you do it in real life, which is so counteractive because you show it to me and I go, yeah, did you see what he did on TV for millions of people to see?
Right.
I can't imagine what he's doing behind closed doors. That's the way that I think.
right.
On
No,
yeah,
I compare it to, oh gosh, there are classic examples of guys who or women who have played like these really diabolical characters in film and television, and then everybody says, the crazy thing is, nicest person in the world. Like, they're not actually a bad guy at all. Um, here's a recent one. Colin Farrell in The Penguin. Penguin's a diabolical dude, and then you see him out of like they cut, and all of a sudden he's Colin Farrell again, going, "All right, everyone, that was great, and he's like just such a nice guy or whatever. If Vince was that, if everybody said, like Vince plays plays an awful bad guy, but he's actually the sweetest guy in the world, that would make a huge
that's
difference.
the
But
tough
everybody
part.
says no, he's actually worse off camera.
It seems like he screwed himself by staging that comeback because,
Mhm.
again, from what I understand, he retired initially, that comeback, then merged the WWE with the UFC to create TKO, and then when the sex trafficking thing, he no longer had the power he used to have because of the merger, and
Well,
he was outnumbered for the first time
yeah,
in
no,
his career.
no, it's exactly what happened.
He really shouldn't be the face of any company anymore because he changed his face so much in the last 5 years. He's unrecognizable as Vince McMahon.
He is a weirdo looking. He does look like a weirdo now.
Anyway, that's that. Let's move on. And wrap up this show here. What's
Let's do
next?
it. Guys, I'm just gonna give a brief review of this. I saw Twisters. This also had a bit of a weird Wizard of Oz connection. There was a lot of references to the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. I saw Twisters. I'll be brief. This was kind of way overhyped for me. Probably would have been more fun at the theater, but it was good enough. But I wasn't really that blown away by it.
Wow, you are absolutely fired.
Nailed a bunch of puns in there as well. Let's move on to the weekly box office, and then we can get out of here. How about that? Wicked is the number one movie of the weekend, bringing in 14 million. The global estimate is 162. These numbers probably will fluctuate. I was looking at Barbie last year. That brought in, during its weekend estimate, was 155. By Monday, that number actually ballooned up to 162. So I could see this actually going up just a little bit between now and tomorrow on Monday when we get the final numbers. Gladiator 2 came in at 55 million in the number 2 spot, which is an okay opening for that. Red 1 dropped to number 3 with 13.2. I have no idea what this is. Bonfer Pastor Spy Assassin brought in $5 million. Did you guys go see this?
So actually, I was supposed to go to AMC Mystery Movie, and it was this, and I canceled because it sounded
then at
terrible, and
number-
it's made by Angel Studios.
Oh, there you go. So then at number 5, Venom: The Last Dance slides down to number 5 and with $4 million. The collective box office was over $200 million this weekend for the first time since July 26th. That's when Deadpool and Wolverine opened. Glicked, if you will, quote unquote, combined for roughly 170 million. Not quite the Barbenheimer effect that we saw last year, even though
No.
many people are trying to paint it as one.
They're so desperate to
don't-
make it be one, but no one's talking
I
about
don't-
Gladiator. No one. No one.
Nobody's
No
nobody's
one.
into it. I did see the demographic breakdowns for Wicked and Gladiator are basically the same. It's Gladiator's crowd was about 70% male, and Wicked's audience was about 70% female. So I'm not seeing any indication that the two are benefiting from each other at all, despite people kind of there being like a mild push. The internet did not jump on this the way they did Barben. However, the split is pretty close. In 2023, Oppenheimer did about 50% of the opening weekend that Barbie did. And this week, Gladiator did about 48% the open that Wicked did. So it is comparable in that sense, although obviously Oppenheimer was a much bigger open last year. Anyway, that's about all I have for this week. Wicked is a huge movie. It's the third highest open of the year. I imagine it will definitely be a top 5 movie by the end of its run, if not higher. So, yeah, really good movie. A lot of different ways to interpret its success. But that's all I got this week.
Sweet. Well, that's going to do it for us then. Be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube, So Many Sequels, and in your favorite podcasting app, whichever way you choose to enjoy the show. We've got Austin Powers coming up later this week to end 1999 November, and then it's So Many Santas time. I kind of can't believe it, but we are here. If you want to get more involved with the show, you can join our Patreon. Just search So Many Sequels there, and you'll get our Discord access. And then finally, SoManySequels.com. You can find links to our socials there and all of our past episodes. So be sure to do that. Oh, also, one other fun thing that I didn't even tell you guys yet. The video version of the show is now available on Spotify for people
Oh, neat.
who are enjoying that. Spotify is pumping up its podcasting and creative tools. So now you can watch us on Spotify. So that's fun.
Cool.
But that's it. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.